think, is to recognise what the Labour Party is, and it's not a socialist party. There are socialists in it, and those socialists, I hope, would be guided by Marxism, but they're not necessarily. There's a form of ethical socialism, there's a form of Fabian socialism. The role of the Marxist left is very, very small in this country, and that's because in this country, unlike most European countries, it was the trade unions that formed the political organisation, rather than in most European countries, certainly in Germany, it was the other way around, and so therefore there were, we said, or it has been said, that the Social Democratic Party in the 19th century in Germany became revisionist. In other words, they revised Marxism. We have been, basically what we've had is Labourism and Reformism, and the strength of a Marxist current has been very, very weak, only in the small sets historically. And so, in that sense, I think that's, yes, in that sense, we have got a small body of people who would call themselves Marxist, and this library is in a way, the sort of the major centre of gravity for those, and why we call ourselves a workers' school. But actually popularising Marxist ideas, let alone trying to say that how relevant can ever, is a big, big struggle. It's a big struggle in this country in particular, a country which has not been as amenable to Marxist or communist or socialist Marxist ideas in the same way as other European countries. I think we've got a much steeper hill to climb here. But I think that the role of theory is very, very important, because it's only through a class analysis that we can arrive even to asking the right questions, let alone getting the right answers. So underlying the Brexit debate, there is, I mean, we might be on opposite, vote in different ways, but there are underlying issues which I think we would all agree about, because we're coming from a class or a class perspective, a class analysis. So, as I say, I think this is the Labour Party. I wish there were more Marxists in the Labour Party. I wish a lot of the young activists and momentum people would get some socialist thinking and theory behind them. That's not to write anybody off, but I do think that unless you've got some notion of why society is like it is, it's very difficult to know how you're going to change it.
Yeah, I can say a couple of points. The first is, I think probably the first time I've known her in 40 years, I'm in a position to correct Mary on one point. Marxism is omnipotent because it is true, was said by the man hanging on the wall behind you, not by Stalin.
No, that's all right.
I'm afraid so, yeah.
Well, we'll fight about that.
And obviously phrases like that do lend themselves to a certain dogmatism, but I think the fact that, whether it was said by Lenin or Stalin, it was Lenin, the fact that there's been such a huge revival of interest in Marx since 2008 shows whoever said it was onto something. I mean, even if not in a sort of linear way, I mean, that there has been this revival, huge revival of interest in Marxism. And the problem has been, in my view, people are very interested in it as particularly a means of coming to grips with the crisis in world capitalism since 2008. But that having a political articulation has been much, much more complicated. But I think that is starting to change, that is starting to turn. And I do disagree with anyone who says that now the left is weak. I don't think that's an adequate description of politics in Britain today. There is a certain sense in which we were weak for a very long time, and I would acknowledge that there's a certain sense in which the left, with which I identify, and Mary and Ben and so on, remains weak. But a left is now strong. It is has a position in the Labour Party it's not attained since the Second World War, at the very least, previously, and has taken that to a point where it secured the support of 40% of the electorate in a general election. And that is the underlying thing powering that is the crisis. And 90% of the case for socialism has always rested on capitalism. liberalism. It's malfunctioning. The other 10% is the sort of vision of the future, the idealism in the non-philosophical sense that means. So I think we can be a bit more optimistic, perhaps, than that tone suggests.
What tone? My tone?
Oh, yes. Yes, yours.
Or Wolf tone.
That was fine. No, I mean, the left is weak at the moment. I absolutely agree. There needs to be far more analysis and understanding of Marxism. But there are, it seems to me now, thousands, even tens of thousands of people newly coming into political activity who are learning how to struggle politically, learning how to fight in the circumstances that we're in now, and have stood around the radical leadership of the Labour Party for 3.5 years now and kept it sustained. They do need to deepen their understanding. Marxism is the key to that. The weakness of political education is an Achilles heel in this. I would absolutely agree. And I also, I think, agree that the way to address the Brexit problem is to say it emerges from a situation the working class movement has been very weak. Its political articulation, its capacity to be a class for itself in the Marxist term has been very much weaker. So both sides, I mean, Ben is absolutely right that the Leave campaign was hegemonised by nationalistic, even racist forces. It's also true that a large number of people marching today for a people's vote are hegemonised by the sort of detritus of New Labour and Lord Heseltine and the sort of Brussels variant of neoliberalism, and that expresses our weakness. And I think Labour's position of trying to move back, however weak a way, onto a class position, that actually people on both sides of this argument have similar problems and similar aspirations, and actually whether you're in or out of the European Union isn't going to solve that. We were in the European Union for a very long time and it didn't stop car factories closing. If we go out, there might be more car factories. But, whatever way you cut at this question, the decisive thing is what we can, in the short term, is what we can do in Britain. And, of course, in the longer term, it is an international struggle. So sorry, that's rather a long-winded contribution. But I think I've said what I want.
Thank you. Can I just say something? I've never been so willfully misinterpreted. If I said, because I actually agree with almost everything you said, apart from your criticism of what I said. No. I think I said the Marxist element within the left is weak and always has been historically. The left is growing. I mean, we see it here all the time. I mean, it's just and young people who really are asking the question why. So I don't want to be a kind of naysayer or a glass half empty person, especially since I haven't got a glass at all at the moment. But I think the left is divided, and I think that the political that's my point really was about political education and how do we ensure that, not we ensure, I don't mean the people in this room, but how do we get over the fact that historically there has been such a weak Marxist left within, and yet our ideas, if we had a way of ensuring that those ideas were spoken about, as we, again, the example is here, and the example is the conference, people were interested. So it's really, the big problem really is the ideological apparatus of the state. How do we smash it? That's the key thing. So that we have got some vehicle for popularising what are popular ideas. So, but I do think the left is not weak, it's strengthening, but it's divided. And it's not only just over Brexit. And again, I think that whole Brexit debate is, it really, the underlying issue is looking at what the role of the state is. What do we mean by popular sovereignty? Why have we allowed the right to colonise that? Why don't we understand our own history and realise that that popular sovereignty thing was raised by the levellers, the English Revolution? It was something that's part of our history. And yet, this is the essence of one of the bits of the division of the left, is that we did allow that Leave campaign to be taken over by the right wing. And I do think that is part of that is to do with the divisions of the left and the lack of understanding of some of these underlying issues. So, I agree with you, apart from all of them. I
Not
do
from my
agree.
disagreeing with you.
I could say more.
Oh God, still do.
Well, it's very, what's the word? Surprising to find that there's a gap between the two of you, and that I find myself as needing to find a way of compromising, resolving your differences, given your long-standing agreements over the many years. And what I would point to, and I do see this as part of a Marxist analysis, is that, and particularly within Britain, where it arose with Mrs. Thatcher, is that neoliberalism has been associated with the deliberate exclusion, dissolution, marginalisation of not only trade union but left-wing movements, institutions, etc. So the capacity for popular participation in decision-making and so on has been totally circumscribed in the last 30 years, and we can see that in all sorts of ways. I mean, actually Mrs. Thatcher sat down and said, who voted against me? Trade unions, will get rid of them. Large city councils, will get rid of them. Civil servants, will get rid of them. You know, it's very, very clear political strategy of dissolving the centres of power for progressive movement. At the same time, this has not been a liberal in the sense of individual freedom. It's been a quite extraordinary concentration of power, authoritarian power at the centre, particularly in Britain, but throughout the world, serving financial interests. All right? And that is what's created the huge volatility in political movements, which can go to the right and go to the left. So what we've witnessed with Corbyn, which, you know, let's face, was an extraordinary accident in some respects, arising out of a sort of Blair own goal of giving individuals a vote rather than the trade union movement, has created this, as Andrew says, very, so in a sense I'm seeking a compromise here between the dissolution of organised labourism within Britain, as opposed to popular movements for left-wing ideas, however well understood and institutionally grounded. And for me, what that suggests, and in a sense Brexit is not a fertile terrain on which to do this, the need to build organisational, institutional, rebuild the organisation, institutional expressions of those left-wing aspirations. So for me, actually, Labourism looks pretty good at the moment. If we could get an expansion of the welfare state, etc., that would be good. So I'm seeking a compromise.
A synthesis. What a compromise.
A synthesis. Oh, a dialectical. I don't know which one of you is a thesis and which one's the antithesis, but I'm providing the synthesis. Yeah.
If this is what ACAS can really do, then.
Well, I'd just like to add that I do think the question of political education is absolutely central. It's absolutely central to what we do here. I think one of the many things, apart from the conference and all the programmes that we've run, that's been exciting in the last year, has been that the library has been involved in the World Transformed, which is, I think it had 6,000 people, some of them grey-haired, a lot of them younger, actually getting interested in Marxism. So looking outwards. So I think there's a big message for the library about how we need to carry on being engaged, looking outwards.
You should say about what we did the World Transform, Mary.
Okay. Yeah. So we had a Marxist Q&A session. This way.
Yeah.
We had a Marxist Q&A session. Myself, Mary, and Richard Clark, who I think said he would be here. I'm not sure he is. And we had about 50 people came, I think, and it was a really healthy discussion.
Everything you wanted to know.
Everything you wanted to know about Marxism, but we're afraid to ask. Based partly on the fortnightly column we have in the Morning Star for Marx. And that's just one of the kind of, I guess, the national events we've been participating in. We've also been doing collaborations with the Science Museum, the British Museum. So we're kind of reaching much wider audiences now by working collaboratively with other organisations. I personally found it really heartening, actually, that session, because of the kinds of contributions that we had. So yeah, I mean, we did have that session, but we also managed to kind of mobilise some of our collections as part of the World Transform. We had an exhibition of some of our poster art that we've just digitised, and so we're hoping it's the beginning of a longer term relationship as well.
Thank you. Any other questions, contributions?
Disagreements.
Disagreements?
Like a disagreement.
Right.
Can I just do a plug for, because you mentioned the role of the state, we've actually got a film series coming up starting on Wednesday the 8th of May on the state class struggle. Sorry, I'm looking for Richard and Mary because she's running with us. On class struggle, the state and film. So we've got 3 sessions on consecutive Wednesdays, and we'll be showing archive film footage from Chris and having discussion about some of these struggles in the 60s, 70s and 80s. So do come along.
There's just one I was interested in. You said about Thatcher destroying institutions of the working class to the left. But what struck, because I work at home often by myself, so I've got the radio on all the time. And from the sort of Victorian kind of thing about honest toil and labourers under the sunshine, sort of creating, the respect sort of given to sort of a working class kind of ideal. It's now just a vilification of the working class, just constantly. And it may be in academia that process isn't in operation, maybe that isn't. But my God, in popular radio, popular culture, I've never seen any or heard anything so fierce as the vilification of the working class. And I just wonder where you think that process will lead, or is it a process? Or, I mean, it's partly to do with education, because if people were equally educated, the fight back would be greater, it would be more effective. But that's just a sort of an idle comment, really, an observation.
I'm not convinced you're right. I mean, I'm not about the media representation of the working classes. In a sense, that it's almost they can afford to see them almost romantically, as well as something belonging to the past. I don't know. I'm not the best for popular culture, but there's a very different I don't know where you're thinking of, the EastEnders, which I can't say I watch too much, or the Archers, where over many, many years they've become sort of romantic.
No, it's the theory that if you voted Brexit, you're a racist bigot.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
It's kind of
I thought you were talking more generally.
There's a lot of validity in what he's saying, because that's all part of the introduction from the United States about the kind of mock self-employment. This is to actually take you out, give the image.
Okay, okay. Oh, I see. I misunderstood what you were
saying. Give the image to the person that they're not working class at all, that they're above the working class, and therefore they should be aspiring.
Okay.
This aspirational thing, always this aspirational thing, as being the modus operandi, and creating this self-employment, which is mock. It has created in the imagery. However, people are seeing through it, and there has been the seedlings of rebellion in that, as we're seeing that some of these kind of delivery drives and all this sort of thing, they are actually forming, they're joining unions in a very, very small way. It's growing, and by word of mouth, they're successful. It starts in the States. We're not doing anything different from what's already happened in the States, and we're growing to fail. But I also in America, one of my representatives getting traction. People are talking about socialism in America. That's what the revolution needs to be before it gets here.
immigration issue and very mixed feelings about what is the nature of sovereignty and so on. So it is a vote of dissent. But I think, and what I was trying to argue earlier is the forms in which that dissent can now be expressed are highly volatile and uncertain because of the erosion, the erosion of actually what have always been long-standing, established ways of expressing this through political participation, through trade unions, through other institutions, and so on. So yeah, I certainly don't accept. I think what's being said, you know, there is, if you like, the equally caricatured view of a London jet-setting European Bremainers. Right? I think the arguments go both ways about caricaturing this. I'm not sure. But in a sense, the message I'm trying to deliver is one in which and actually this also dovetails with the political education points that have been made and the role that Marxist Memorial Library can play. This is about what are the forms of organizations and the channels through which dissent can be both developed and expressed. And it's those which have been actually heavily hollowed out is the word I was looking for. Hollowed out by the 30 or 40 years of Thatcherism, followed by the years of Blairism as well. I mean, there's one particular example I like to give. It doesn't come from me. It comes from research group in Manchester about the two public inquiries which were set up to study the consequences and the reasons for the great financial crisis and why it happened, etc. And what they did was to have a look at the years of service of those who participated in the inquiry, those who were appointed to it. And it was like 98% years of service in the financial sector. Right? Now, if you'd had any other inquiry, you know, 10, 20 or 30 years ago, well, it's already 10, about any major issue, right, you'd have had representation of nationalised industries, trade unions, local government, etc. And that they were just totally excluded. So we can see the forms in which participation in understanding what is going on, in advising on policy, etc., has been hollowed out from popular participation as well as institutional participation of progressive organisations. And that actually means, as I've tried to say before, that the forms of political expression do become very volatile. And they can go to the left, as indeed has happened with Corbyn, Sanders and so on, but also, of course, we get Trump.
Actually, on the inquiries, I think that's a very good point, actually, because when you do look at all of those, you do see exactly what you've said. You really have to look at graphic. But one which actually sticks out in my mind is the Hillsborough one, which seemed to be hijacked outside of that, and the Bishop of Liverpool created a much different format of that inquiry, and it was successful.
After 30 years.
Of course,
yeah.
Of course, but you know, after 30 years, but it was only when the bishop, and then you know, it was then concertinaed. It was still a long time, but at least it achieved something, because it didn't have the kind of constituency that you just outlined there, where it's actually been hijacked and hollowed out. It's you know, the vested interest. It's the self-regulation, isn't it?
Well, we often find out 30 years later when it's become totally anesthetised.
that seems to be one of the, you gave the problem to explain the issues, fundamental issues of Marxism. And if you agree with that, what are the ways of overcoming this issue? Because that's what media constantly propagate, Max Weber kind of analysis of society.
Yes, well, I know what you're talking about, and that is, well, because people don't make the distinction between, or don't understand what strata, and there are strata within the working class, but it's a question of consciousness that really is the issue. But I just wanted to say something about, picking up from what Ben was saying about the legacy of Thatcher, and her decision to destroy all the institutions that were opposing her, but in particular the trade unions, because in 1979 there were 13 million members of trade unions, and today it's half that number. And then it does set me thinking about what is it that assists most in the growth of trade unions, because it's not just now. I mean, in the period before 1910, well, let's say in the 1880s, when there was a huge growth of trade unions amongst semi and unskilled workers, the key role then was played by socialists, people like Eleanor Marx, Ben Tillett, Tom Mann particularly. And then the next period of real forward march of Labour, genuine forward march, was in the 70s. And again, it was the role of the Communist Party and the Liaison Committee of the Defence of Trade Unions actually did help to bring down the government in 74. So then we look today and see, well, trade unions are in a, people say, well, you can't expect trade unions to grow now. We've got 0 hours contract, we've got all of these dreadful working conditions, all the rest of it. And then, but the fact is that in the 1880s they had exactly those conditions. The dockers won a big struggle. I mean, that was the most 0 hours contract kind of employment you could possibly have. It was just picking people out of there, and yet they formed trade unions that had a successful strike. Again, I come back to the role of socialists. So today we have got poor employment situations, and you're quite right to say there has been the growth of trade unions in certain, well, like Uber drivers, like the McDonald's workers and so on. But I think that to make up the ground, we have to have something conscious, as we have had in the past, to say this comes back to the role of socialists and the role of ideas. I'm not saying that that's the only way that you build trade unions, but I'm absolutely sure that without that input, we aren't going to make up the ground that we should have. That's not being defeatist, because you always have to see what's growing and developing. But what isn't, you have to be honest about the situation that you find ourselves in. And the fact is, there are only half the number of trade unionists now. Thatcher has been quite successful, and neoliberalism has been successful. To combat that is a massive political undertaking. It's something that can be done, and the growth of the left is extremely important in that. But it's got to be the left that also understands how important it is to have a strong trade union base. Trade unions, this is where class consciousness develops within unified struggle. And the strength of the Labour Party is precisely because it is a party which has got affiliated trade unions, and potentially that strength is amazing, potentially. But it's got to be reawakened. And it's got to be reawakened because if we get a Labour government, it can only be sustained by extra parliamentary struggle, by what is going on outside Parliament. And trade unions could play, or should play, a major role in that, a mobilising role. But how do we get from there to there? I raise the question because I think these are, that's the, we talk about all the organisations that Thatcher destroyed, but the key thing was putting shackles on trade unions. So the first thing, thank goodness that a Labour government has said that is going to repeal all the anti-union laws. It's absolutely vital, and that's what's held us back, in addition to the appalling kind of neoliberal economic policies which have really meant that workers' rights or working conditions have almost been drawn back to the 19th century. That's the end of that speech. I just had to get that off my chest. And it's linked to class, and it's linked to all of the things that we've just said.
Can I just clarify something about Mrs. Thatcher? Mrs. Thatcher didn't like institutions, and she went for the left to start with because it was easier. She was thrown out of Parliament, thrown out of her job because she was then attacking the lawyers and the accountants as they were, she considers they were privileged and were able to stop other people doing their jobs. And there's an awful lot of Conservative MPs who were lawyers and accountants, and she was toppled because it was a bit too far for them to have their privileges taken away from them.
Really?
Oh, no.
I think we should come. I mean, thank you for
Well,
this
sorry,
contribution. I'm sure.
We were talking
We-
about
we
Mrs.
can-
Thatcher a lot.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I'll
we
just explain that.
can talk about Mrs. Thatcher, but I'd much rather talk about the book and the issues
Oh, yes, of
in
course,
there,
yes,
to
yes,
be
yes.
honest. So I think we should bring this to a close. The book is available there. You're invited to have a drink.
You can't have a drink unless you buy a book.
£10
All right.
and
The,
wine.
yeah, the book is £10, so many thanks for coming, and let's celebrate the book.
Show you. Okay.
Is that all right?
Yes.
Didn't do too bad.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You want to disagree with that?
Sorry?
You have to go make
Yes.
make
You
up for that.
disagree with
Drew.
that?
Not just that.
Except, Billy. Where's he gone?